I've seen a lot of divided opinions towards SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom's remake. Going to the Steam reviews page for Rehydrated will show a game showered with praise and high scores by longtime fans and newcomers to the series alike. And then searching Google for some more professional opinions will, Okay, to be fair, this is just one particularly scathing review. Other critics have been a little kinder in their scoring of Rehydrated. But given how contrasting some of the reviews still are, I was determined to find out for myself just how good, or potentially bad, Rehydrated really was. Now, I'm not someone who's nostalgic for this title. I only played the original for the first time ever at the beginning of the year, and while I mostly enjoyed the 9 hours I spent in 2003's Bikini Bottom, I did find the game rather clunky in some places, with the slide mechanics and combat being especially frustrating. So it's safe to say there'll be no rose-tinted spectacles to look through while playing Rehydrated. However, I'm happy to report that, for the most part, it was an absolute delight to revisit this wacky underwater town, and the creators of Rehydrated, developers Purple Lamp Studios and publishers THQ Nordic, should be incredibly proud of their work. For starters, the graphical updates are gorgeous. The original wasn't hideous to look at by any means, but when compared to its remake, the difference is like night and day. Models and objects are smoother and less jagged. The lighting has been significantly improved with added light rays and bloom effects. And the colours are so vivid, I swear they could burst out of the screen. Now, some people aren't happy with these graphical changes, with many complaining about an oversaturation of colour, and others mentioning how OG BFBB was much closer to the style of the first few seasons of the cartoon. I will agree with the first complaint. I'm someone who loves over-the-top, eye-popping colours, but even I was getting a headache in some areas because of how oversaturated everything was. Maybe a slider to turn down the brightness and contrast wouldn't go amiss here. But in terms of those complaining about how they should have gone with the original look, I don't agree. Yes, it is a remake, and yes, it should relate to the original game in some way, but Rehydrated has been made with a modern audience in mind, not just longtime fans. Don't get me wrong, of course. I grew up watching all those old episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants. They were a big part of my childhood, and late 90s, early 2000s Bikini Bottom will always have a special place in my heart. But to younger players, that art style won't mean anything unless they've watched at least some of the old episodes of the show, and if they haven't, those players may feel detached from the game, which can then put them off playing it very early on, or even prevent them from buying it at all. So yeah, the graphics could do with a little bit of tweaking, especially turning down that intense saturation, but I personally believe going with a modern look akin to later SpongeBob episodes and movies was a good call. Moving on to something more light-hearted that hopefully won't leave me bombarded with angry comments, the extra animations that have been included in Rehydrated are rather delightful and very much appreciated. In OG BFBB, dialogue scenes felt fairly stale, with characters having very little animation besides swaying on the spot and occasionally raising their arms. In Rehydrated, they now react appropriately to what's being said to them.
Where did they come from?
Where? I don't know. Not for me, though, that's for sure.
Where did they come from?
Where? I don't know. Not for me, though, that's for sure.
Not only that, but SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy's idol animations are both adorable and hilarious, especially when said characters act out famous scenes from the show. The most important changes to BFBB, however, come in the form of small but necessary quality of life changes to the gameplay itself. Indeed, most of the complaints I had with the original game seem to have been ironed out completely. Sections in OG BFBB that took me into double digits of attempts because I simply couldn't get a hang of the controls only took me 1 or 2 tries this time around. By far, the worst offenders for me originally were the slide and rolling SpongeBob sections. For some reason, I just couldn't get the hang of the controls, even after 9 hours of play. You not only need to turn your character with the left analog stick, but also turn the right analog stick to move the camera around, which will aid in making sharper turns. But if you don't adjust fast enough for the next turn, you're going to sail right off the edge. Couple in the fact your view is often blocked by random bits of the environment, and if you fall off at any point, the timer for the challenge stops, forcing you to have to get to the bottom of the slide just to travel back to the top and restart. Yeah, these mini-games weren't exactly fun for me. Pretty much everything I just mentioned there has been improved upon. Turning the camera with the right analog stick to make sharper corners is no longer necessary. My view isn't constantly blocked by random bits of the environment, and, most definitely the best change of all, falling off a slide will now teleport you back to the top so you can retry. And because of this quality of life change, I actually attempted the slides multiple times in the hopes of receiving those wonderful golden spatulas I had neither the skill nor patience to obtain in the original game. I still suck and only managed to get 1 or 2, but hey, at least I gave it several tries. To name a few other quality of life changes I noticed throughout Rehydrated, projectiles fired by enemies are now easier to dodge due to the big red markers that appear beforehand. Character-specific abilities like SpongeBob's bubble bowl and wall jumping seem much more forgiving in terms of position and timing respectively. And, another one I'm incredibly thankful for, sneaking can now be done by holding down the left trigger on a controller instead of having to lightly push on the analog stick. So yeah, small changes indeed, but they go a long way towards making this remake just that little bit smoother to play over its predecessor. Okay, so I've showered Rehydrated with tons of praise. Suffice to say, I'm a huge fan of the remake, and I can definitely tell that a lot of care, effort, and attention to detail went into putting this together. But does that mean it's a perfect game?
No.
For as much as I adored Rehydrated, I did notice a number of issues cropping up here and there. One particularly egregious example came from the very opening cutscene, where all the dialogue slowly fell out of sync with the animations.
I have devised an ingenious plan to finally steal the Krabby Patty formula.
So we put the toy robots in here.
Okay.
Good night, SpongeBob.
Unfortunately, that was far from the only problem. I had several issues with bungee jumping, for example. The camera was atrocious enough, frequently losing sight of SpongeBob, which made trying to line him up to the items almost impossible. But the dive mechanic didn't help either, and often refused to respond to my incessant button mashing, even when it was highlighted to say I could dive again. Then I had some minor problems with Sandy's lasso swing ability, at least at first. Now, I could be wrong here, but I swear in the original game, you only had to tap once to latch onto a hook. And even if that wasn't the case, the sign in Rehydrated clearly reads, Sandy can swing from a swing hook by pressing B. And yet, when I did just that, for some reason, in order to swing on these hooks, you have to hold down B for the entire duration. A bit awkward to do when you also need to tap A to jump to the next swing hook, and then immediately hold B again to latch onto the next one when prompted. I got used to it eventually, but it was still cumbersome to do even nearing the end of Rehydrated. Now, there were more generic problems I faced, like the game freezing on occasion, or even outright crashing just as I was about to beat Mr. Krabs' notoriously difficult dream section. That stung a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. But errors like this happen so rarely, it's almost not worth mentioning, and it is the PC version. I'm not making excuses for the game, but playing on PC and getting 1 or 2 crashes is pretty much standard these days. However, I have read about several hitches affecting Rehydrated's brand new multiplayer feature. Now, I haven't actually tried it because I'm simply not interested, but from the videos I have watched, complaints seem to be towards missing sound effects, weird jumps as if you skipped half a cutscene, and, worst of all, the lack of an actual boss fight with this giant Squidward robot monstrosity. All you get is wave after wave of the same robots you fought in the single-player story, and then the Squidward robot just blows up and sinks to the bottom of the ocean. I know that's a spoiler, but I'm being nice and saving you the heartache of playing through 45 minutes of nothingness with next to no reward. Now, I feel like this will be improved upon in a later patch, if it hasn't been already by the time I've done this review, but when you're shipping a remake of a much beloved title with this new shiny feature, I would really check it's up to the standard the rest of your game is at. To summarise this review and give my overall opinion, however, I think Rehydrated is a faithful remake of a fairly decent game. Yes, not everyone likes the new graphics, but I believe they are very much needed to entice a new and younger audience into playing. It's all about making money after all. But I'm not saying that Rehydrated is a soulless money-grabbing scheme. Far from it. Purple Lamp Studios have clearly put a lot of time and effort into Rehydrated, and it shows, with the inclusion of much beloved meme references from the TV series, the addition of several desperately needed quality of life changes, and of course a new gaming mode, even if it is a little bit flawed right now. At the end of the day, I think Rehydrated is a decent remake that's far from overpriced. So if you do want to pick it up and give it a go, whether you're a newcomer or a long-time fan, I'd say the price was well worth it. Anyway, I hope you guys found this review insightful, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like as it really helps me out. And I'll see you in whatever I play or talk about next. Bye bye!
Are you still here?